Tonight, once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Brian Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latex gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Phil J. Pride, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
You guys know what to do, just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT Show. I'm Daniel, and today we're going back into the Nancy Guthrie disappearance or abduction. She's been missing now over 40 days with little information coming from law enforcement still to this point. Now, there's been some movement here to report, so to speak. Brian Ensign reported that they were looking into some construction workers and things of that nature. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about, a possible profile of this guy, what kind of person we should be looking for. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell, share the content. We got a special guest returning to the show, Steve from True Crime Web. How's it going, Steve? Welcome to the show. Let everybody know a little bit about yourself.
I'm a retired law enforcement officer, and I have worked all different types of cases from when my career started from it being in the jail, working the road, going and progressing into investigations, and eventually getting state certification as in the initial graduating class for the state of Georgia back in the early 90s, late 80s for the CSI program, which we didn't know what CSI was back then. We were just ID techs, and they overtrained us, and it was took me about 2 years to get through that training program, and since then I've used it throughout my career to process all different types of crime scenes, from burglaries to homicides. And then after I retired, did a lot of consult work and did some training in some high school as far as getting careers set up for some of the training schools that we had in the area. And after that, I became trying to become an ambassador for law enforcement with the YouTube world. And from that, we evolved to having a foundation where we go out and work cold cases across the country for families at no expense.
That's amazing. And that website is, I believe, truecrimeweb.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Go check it out, guys. Somebody could put the link in the description or in the comment section. I'd appreciate it. Go check that out. You can help support Steve and the foundation. He's done some great work. We've talked a couple of cases together and the ins and outs. And, Steve has done a lot of great work when it comes to when we covered the Brian Kohberger case. And we were getting ideas about, for instance, Brian Kohberger possibly wearing booties or if he, what some of the victims could have seen, like Dylan Mortensen at night. And he has those videos on his channel. I highly recommend going out there and checking it out. Great stuff. Now, here recently, we'll jump into the Nancy Guthrie case. Here recently, there's been Brian Ensign reported that law enforcement were talking about some construction workers that may have been working around the area. When we first started talking about this very early on, you mentioned to me about construction workers. Why would it be important to identify the construction workers nearby, and how could they mask an abduction if they were involved with their employment?
Well, when you look at crimes in general, you have different types of crimes. You have crimes of opportunity, and you also have crimes that involve targeting. In my career, investigations of working all different types of crimes, you'll see that these criminals, a lot of times, when they're in an area and they have a job, they, as you know, there's quite a few criminals that are on probation, and part of their probation most of the time is that we have to maintain gainful employment. And some of that gainful employment is within construction crews, from every different thing from framers to roofers. In our part of the country, roofers were extremely hard core individuals. When you went to a probation revocation, you saw a lot of people that was in that type of line of work that was on probation because it's extremely hard work, and but it's easily to get a job in that field. But when they're within, they use that excuse to be in an area that their eyes and their core tells they're criminals at heart. They never change, some of these guys. Now, there's some hardworking, absolutely honest construction people out there. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the criminals that are using not only what they've learned through the jailhouse backstage of knowledge, schooling, but they bring it to their work, and they go out and they profile. Everybody profiles. Criminals profile you. They look at a target, they look at a neighborhood, and they see, and they become accustomed while they're working within these neighborhoods of the going and comings of certain people. They may see a target, and that they may not immediately act on it, but it may be a month, it may be 6 months, it could be a year before they'll come back and act within that community. And that's the importance of understanding the community, what's going on in the community. And I had many cases, whereas we identified former workers in a neighborhood coming back and targeting victims within that neighborhood, not always the house they were working on, sometimes the house they were working on, but often neighbors of those houses where they were in a position to watch and see what was going on.
Yeah, so it gives them an opportunity to really get a scope of the layout of the land, so to speak, and the ins and outs of the potential victim. What does it say to you, though? Like, to me, for them to be asking about this means a couple of things to me, and then I kind of want to get your opinion. This means that they're kind of starting back at square one. Now, I know that might seem, disheartening to few. I'm shocked that they're barely going into this at this point, and I'll get your opinion on the timing in which this happened. But this tells me that maybe perhaps they did have, and we know that they detained a few people, but they had maybe certain avenues that they thought they were going to be going down. They had a good idea of a suspect, maybe a good idea of some clues. And for them to be starting over at this point, going back to this must mean that it didn't pan out. And now here they are back to square one. What do you think?
Well, as you said, we talked about this weeks and weeks ago, right after it occurred, and I made contact with some of the involved agencies to put in that line of questioning.
Right.
Although it's always better safe than sorry to tip in things that I've learned from my career, and I often do that. They take it with a grain of salt or not, but I'm going to do what I can just in case, because there's so many things going on in a case that sometimes you may overlook the obvious. And they may have looked into some of it back then, and they may have found a person of interest. And now they're trying to see, they may have somebody in mind, and so they're trying to identify that individual being on a work crew. Don't know. But if this is the first time after 40-something days, and they hadn't looked at work crews until now, that's kind of disappointing. But I'm hoping that this is not the first time, but the first time it's coming to knowledge, because, like I said, that's one of the things you have to look at, because this victim was targeted at some point, crossed the paths of some individual that looked at her and identified her as a target. Now, when did that occur? Did it occur at a restaurant, shopping? Did it occur at her residence? But at some point, she was targeted.
Mm-hmm. And we can kind of transition into like the profile aspect of this. I felt like this guy, there was more to this. Like, the mere fact that he's on camera, positioning of the gun, etc. I strongly suspect he may have had a jammer. There was some recent information that popped out that there was no, there was nothing captured on the cameras for the pool, the backyard, and the sliding door in the side of the house at any point throughout the time that the suspect was there. But there is activity before and after, including when law enforcement arrived to check out the area. It just kind of strongly indicates to me that, with the backpack, because everybody wondered why it was so stuffed up, it appears that some individuals that have been able to use a jammer that have been seen on camera have a pretty stuffed backpack, and utilizing that backpack as a tool to disconnect or jam the signal between the camera and the Wi-Fi. So that tells me he wanted to be seen. A little bit about that tells me he wanted to be seen.
Yeah, there's certain characteristics about this individual that's not normal, as far as you'll see often in criminals of that go out at night. Sometimes of course, you got those creepers, peeping toms that go out to try to see what's going on in the neighborhood. Well, we have an individual that went into a house, and of course, what type of message was he prepared to be seen by chance on camera? Absolutely. He prepared everything he could that if he was caught on camera, he would not be recognizable. And was that part of the messaging? And if it is, that's another different type of individual. But we have a hardcore individual here. We have individual. There's a lot of people that go out and do burglaries, but when they find that someone's at home, they turn around and run and leave. We didn't have that in this case. We didn't have a burglar that was surprised by someone being there. We had someone that went in, and and upon confrontation, there was an injury at some point, and he wasn't scared about the injury. He didn't, even after the injury occurred, he didn't break away and escape. He took her with him, and which is a different type of personality. We're not talking about just someone that's early in just a burglary type of individual. We're talking about someone that's extremely dangerous, has proven that, had no mercy for an 84-year-old woman, and took her regardless, because we can look at our own families and look at our mothers and our grandmothers and think that if someone came in on them, injured them, they were bleeding, and it takes a special type of person to not react in some compassionate and with empathy towards someone that's injured. This individual didn't. He continued through her fear. Was he feeding off that fear? He's not scared of it, and he continued even, and to this day, that if she is alive, hopefully she is. If so, the odds every day are less and less that she is. But we'll always hope until we have proof otherwise.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think you were spot on everything you said, especially about this kind of person. To me, I think that this is an obsessive kind of crime, and maybe perhaps the message was towards Savannah. Maybe perhaps it's an effective thing. Maybe it was more of an anger towards Savannah Guthrie. If this guy went out to abduct and take Savannah Guthrie's mom, and it was for the purpose of hurting Savannah, to he wanted to be seen on camera. He wanted, just my opinion about that, but if he wanted to be seen on camera from the front doorbell camera with a gun in front of him to send a message, could his appearance also be that message towards her?
Well, absolutely. I mean, as you've mentioned before, BTK, not BTK, but also, BTK is another sick individual that did confrontation and repeat, going in there, abducting women, taking them off for his own gratifications. But the Zodiac was one that would dress up and had a message maybe not to the world because social media wasn't so prominent then, but absolutely to the individual with his mask. There's not a lot of difference if between the presentation of the firearm, the manner of dress, the gloves, the mask, everything about that individual would strike fear into any individual, man or woman. If you saw this guy coming out of the dark, your first thought is, we need to do something about this. This is dangerous. That's how come we believe in the Second Amendment.
Now, let me pull up this screen real quick. Let's see, entire screen. One of the things that a lot of folks talk about is the timeline that he was there. Do you think he attempted to make entry through this door?
I think he made entry through that door.
How do you
think he found a key? I think he had access to a key in some shape, form, or fashion. And I base this, it's just my opinion, but I often see he didn't avoid this camera. He went, people say, well, he wasn't prepared to disable this camera. Well, at some point he did. He went up there and took it off, put it in his pocket, or maybe even used it later for other parts of the crime. It may have been activated numerous times. It may not be other cameras that's catching movement. It could be this one that he's activating by moving it, or it's, I don't know if it was voice activated also or not. I don't know if that was a default or setting on it, or if it's something that would have to be set. We don't know that. Law enforcement hasn't released anything about that I know of.
Right.
You may know more. But often we have, and this is a warning to all the people out there, if you keep a key outside, certain times criminals will find it, gain access. So there's that possibility. Maybe a possibility of he may have at some point had access by not only him, but maybe a relationship he has with a worker that's been in the house that has a key to it. Or he may have had access to her vehicle, worked on her vehicle at some point and had access to her house keys. There's a lot of ways people can get keys. And then again, he may have that skill set. We're talking about individuals. Everybody says this guy's an idiot. We don't know that. This guy may have had skill sets. He may have come up there before and removed the locks and made copies of the keys. We don't know what the motivation of this individual is. We don't know how long he stalked her and put her under surveillance. We don't know much of anything about this individual.
No, we don't. And, so here's my only, these are my puzzle pieces, so to speak. And this is where I'm kind of connecting some dots. And in my opinion, could there be some blank spots? 100%. But we have this image here. We have the fact that the cameras around the house didn't capture anybody around it. Now it's, it captured movement before and after, but not during the time of. And we have the fact that he had a stuffed backpack in another image with an antenna sticking out. And we also have that several neighbors close to Savannah's or Nancy Guthrie's Nancy Guthrie's home also experienced some issues with their cameras that night during the time of the incident. When I'm looking at all these pieces, I can't help but fit the pieces to the point where this guy did have some sort of jammer, and that he utilized it not in the front but in the back. Why he came back to the front, I don't know. Maybe perhaps he wanted to maintain a secret of how he made entry into the house, leaving the backpack, I'm assuming, maybe in the backyard or something. If this is the same night, do you get what I'm saying? Are you I think he may have made entry through the back.
Yeah. Well, the reason, they said that where other family members were caught on the camera at the back, they said that there was no thumbnails caught of him. And the reason that, and I can tell you this, I did a lot of stakeout in my career. I saw a lot of criminals approach, commit crimes, and then leave. And they all have certain things and certain criminals that sometimes when you're working burglaries or even armed robberies, that certain criminals will go in and they will immediately go to a secondary entry point and prop it open, get it ready so that if they're interrupted during a criminal event, they have a way out that they don't have to worry about unlocking the door. It's ready to go. They have, they've made point of entry in one way, and they're setting it up that if they have to get out of there quickly, they've already know the path of escape.
Right.
And so I've just seen that in my career.
What do you think he could be doing in this image? Do you think, well, first and foremost, do you think it's the same night?
I do. And that I sent you, that little animation of the blowing it up, that
I believe I have it somewhere. Right.
Yes. When you play it, you see that there's some little fine dots in the back. And those little dots, not just that, but if you look around his head, you have the lights in the background, but there's little shiny areas that overlap. Each of those little small dots that's over his left and right shoulders, beside him, the shadow line on the base at the bottom behind his right hand, all of that coincided. That I took that image and I overexposed it, and as you can see, that even the shadows from both of them line up exactly the same. And if it was done on the 11th when there's no moon, you wouldn't have the same shadows. While you may have that, if all these little points of light, and there's probably 5 or 6 little points of light around him, reflections, that they wouldn't be as reflective on a moonless night, such as what the 11th was versus February the 1st, which was a full moon. I mean, I think he was at a new moon, or there was some type of a different moon phase on the 11th.
So you
but
think
everything about this picture, now you could have that all the lights in the background are on preset, that everybody keeps certain porch lights on, or lights on in a house at night that are consistent. But it's highly unlikely. I would, the only way to tell is as an investigator, is that you go there, you stand in that place, and you look at those little pinpoints of light, and if they're on at that time period, you can say, okay. And another reason I think that it is the same night is that the sheriff made a statement that speculating that it was any other date was harmful to the case. And so he was defensive that this occurred on a different night than the same night.
And so you think that those lights, the little dots that are in the background, a lot of people have been pointing out, they think that they could be headlights or some sort of lights, interior lights of a vehicle, or maybe perhaps the reverse lights of a vehicle. A lot of people say that at some point when he looks to go get the plant from the ground, that he looks off to the left, out towards the direction of those dots. Do you think those are lights, or it sounds like you think those are reflections of the moon on a reflective surface? Well,
some of it, like where the shadow line is, I think those are, like I said, even in that darkest, that first image that you see with no backpack, if you take that image and you go into any of your Photoshops and you brighten it up, this image here, if you overexpose this and take it to its fullest brightness, you'll start seeing that these little pinpoints stand out more, and the shadows stand out more, and those reflections. And those if some of those are reflections off of, regardless what type of metal surface or reflective surface it is, that it has to be either from the moon or it has to be from some type of light source. And when he looks off to the left, there is a momentary glint that comes through. Did he hear a car coming? Did he look to look at the vehicle that was coming? Because at night you can hear noises for great distances. Yeah. And and I don't know what the traffic pattern sounds like at night, law enforcement does, because they would have stood in that area and looked where he looked, and had cars travel those paths so that they can see what he would see and understand the environment.
See, here's my thought on that image. I also think it's from the same night. Now, you see where he's at when the camera comes out. He's a little bit far out. He was about right here when when that still images occurred. The reason why I think it's so dark is because I think it was just activated. And I think that when a camera motion I've noticed when a camera is initially active or activated, that it may be darker, it may be brighter, it may be black and white, then turn color, it may be color, then turn black and white. It's not usually the same. There's always like a brightness or dullness. If that's the case, then that means he wasn't in the frame without the backpack very long. He just got into the frame. Where was he at without the backpack? Where's the backpack in that moment? It doesn't appear that the backpack was on the floor here. And, is it, if they have side cameras, back cameras, and they're not capturing that, I go back to this jammer. I can't help but think that he didn't make, I don't know. I struggle to think maybe he didn't make entry into the front. One of the other things is locksmiths apparently were brought in. Somebody had ran the license plates to some vehicles. I'm not necessarily certain that's the case, because if it was a locksmith, I struggle that a locksmith's not going to have their insignia or their number or something for marketing purposes on their vehicle, because I saw the vehicle that they were referring to. But if they were utilizing locksmiths, that front door, I mean, this is a tough door to get in if you don't have a key, and it doesn't look like it was manipulated otherwise. Does it to you?
No, I would agree with you that. And another thing about law enforcement is that there's nothing that says that they can't take a tag off of some other vehicle they may have confiscated in the past, or as far as undercover, that government has certain people that work undercover doing certain jobs, and locksmith is a good cover. So not saying that's so, but I've seen a lot of undercover vehicles carry tags from just about every type of vehicle that a lot of our undercover officers would utilize confiscated vehicle tags.
That makes sense. Welcome, Josh the Posh 63, to become the US membership. You can become part of the conversation, Josh, and anybody else who wants to become part of the membership. We have a members Discord. There's a link in the Discord. I think I put it up yesterday, so it should still be good. Just go to the community post, select members. There's a link for the Discord. You'll have to link your YouTube membership because it won't allow you if your YouTube membership's not linked in, but become part of the conversation. I'd like to see new faces and become part of the conversation. I'd love to talk to you guys. All right. So yeah, to me, looking at these plants here on the ground, these flowers, does that look like it's stepped on? Does that look like it's stripped? What could you tell from these, like this one here?
There's a lot of something occurred, a lot of manipulation, bending, handling, crunching. Was it stepped on? Was it not? Whereas if they had, and I don't know, they may have confiscated this thing by now. After Brian walked on it, but the failure, because there's certain things called transfer evidence. We know for a fact that the offender at some point stepped on this. What's on his shoes? Is he a mechanic? Is he a welder? Does he work in a metal shop? Does he work in a paint shop? We don't know. What type of transfers could be on here? What type of body hairs? What else could be on this? We don't know. And we're not saying that we would know, but not by seizing that. And we know at some point, even if you say that he didn't enter in this way, we're pretty sure he exited that way.
Yeah, I agree. And me personally, I mean, we haven't heard anything about any blood inside of the room or the house. If this is where the blood is at, I strongly suspect. I mean, it's right at the doorway. This is most likely the exit way. She was most likely bound, in my opinion. I think the search warrant had mentioned that they were looking for restraints. I think law enforcement believe that she may have been restrained, and I think she may have yelled. You know, I mean, this is the first opportunity to get somebody's attention. I think she yelled.
Well, it's very possible because and this is expirated blood, in my opinion. I don't have the first generation or access, but that looks like expirated blood that I have seen hundreds of times through my training and at crime scenes. And so for that to occur, her mouth and nose isn't covered. And if it's not covered, if you're not gagged, and if you're gagged or your mouth is covered, tape, it doesn't matter if a cloth is inserted or a gag is inserted or if tape is used. This is not something that would occur if your mouth and nose is covered. It just is impossible to have this type of expirated blood. And so if her mouth is not covered or she's not gagged, then she does have the ability, if conscious, to yell. If she's unconscious, she could still have expirated blood and not have the capability of yelling.
Interesting. Great point. And again, and you mentioned this before, there's not an indication of her putting her hand down to get up.
Yes, there's a reason for that too. I mean, we have to have some type of control over hands because I've never in my life, and I've had my nose busted, I've had my lips busted, the teeth loosened, and every time at some point I would touch that injury and then touch other surfaces. We don't have any of this blood that we can see that's on the doors, on the windows, on the walls. We don't see a handprint on the each of the tiles, and so there's a reason for that. Is she unable, unconscious, and not moving her hands, or is she bound?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. There, is she bound? Is she unable to move her hands? Is she unconscious? I don't see a
face down there.
I was gonna say, if she,
I don't see a shadow effect.
Exactly. That's what
we
I was.
We don't have a contact blood flow pooling effect that if you're laying there and your face is on the side, you're going to have a pooling. These droplets are individual blood droplets coming from some type of continuous source of blood where the heart and blood is flowing. And these drops can be from a single point of blood droplets with head movement, shoulder movement, arm movement, whatever, but more than likely some type of facial injury that's creating these blood droplets.
I think so. And
with some type of head movement, either under her own power or under the power and the movement by the offender.
How close does she have to be to the ground for the this cluster to be this close?
Well, if we had a scale and could tell what size of drop, because droplets from different, and that's something else. It's hard to determine. It depends on what the blood droplets came from, what surface they're from. But like if they're from a weapon or something, or from a fingertip, they can be a different size than if from a lip or chin. Or the height of the blood droplet falls. You can do a lot of measurements and come up with a lot of conclusions of how high that blood droplet was. How consistent are those blood droplets will tell you if there's head movement up and down. We're guesstimating here what the blood droplets are, but they look like they're about the size of a dime. If those are 1 foot tiles, do we know if those are 1 foot tiles?
That's a pretty big tile. I mean,
let's count across the door. The door would be about a 36-inch door. How many tiles are across the door?
So 1, 2, 3, about 3.
So yeah, they're probably 12-inch tiles, and those look about like the size of a dime. So you're looking at probably a foot or two um, uh, there's a certain distance that they won't get any larger. Like if they're 5 foot and above, they're not going to be any larger than if they was 100 foot up. So there's a distance on that blood droplet.
But wouldn't
Probably
the
2 or 3
cluster
feet.
be a little bit more spread out if it was further up, like on the aspirated aspect?
Yeah, you wouldn't have this. That's the thing, is that with that aspirated blood, I'm looking probably 16 to 18 inches. And some of those droplets could be formed at 2 or 3 feet.
Okay. And what would you think happened first?
If I had clear images, we probably can tell, just like what's on top of what.
Right.
And what type of movement do we have between these blood droplets. And we just don't have the images that, like we have some of these skeleton type blood droplets that can either be from some type of movement in a semi-dry blood droplet, or it can be from some type of blood droplet has almost like a bubble.
Yeah.
You know how sometimes you blow with your saliva, you'll blow a little bubble. Well, blood can do the same thing. And I don't know which blood type this droplet these are. Some of these that are skeletonized, that you just see a ring on the outside. And that could also be from some type of processing that they went in and processed some of the of those blood droplets. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to
Interesting.
Collect blood.
Some folks are asking in the live chat, and I'm curious about this as well. Could she have been carried out and, you know, been like on a fireman's type carry, and leaning over and coughed as they're walking out?
I mean, if she's over his belt line, you're probably looking at, I mean, this, you know, we're looking at a thing that you see this, the main part and the, how much of the pattern. I mean, we're not looking at an overly large pattern. We're probably seeing that some of the particulates of this expirated blood may be 6 or 8 inches of the fine blood to the outside, because I don't really see a lot of blood in this specific image on the clearer tile to the right.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty clear over here.
Yeah.
And it's only,
and you see all the concentration right there. And for that concentration to be, and you could just about cough it and put it out. And that's what I'm saying. I would think that her face was probably within 16 inches to 2 feet or less. And carrying somebody over your shoulder in a fireman carry, you're up there at 3 feet. I just don't see it happening.
yeah, I don't either. I didn't think so. I thought she was close to the ground, and I think
Plus,
she may.
if you're a fireman carry, your head doesn't fall in that position. You're not mouth down.
That's true. That is very true. You know, the other thing too is this is just my personal opinion. And you tell me if the blood pattern would match this. I think she screamed as soon as she walks out. That's when she's getting struck. She gets struck. She falls down, coughs up. I think he lifts her up. She's probably restrained. And I think he held her there for a second. I think she stood there for a little bit. Maybe perhaps he's warning her, you know, continue that, something worse is going to happen, or whatever the case may be. But I think that they stood there for a second. I don't see, it doesn't appear to be like directionality to some of these drops. It almost seems like she was just standing there.
I agree that, and we've talked about this before, that there was some malingering of the time frame here. We stayed here, and we had these blood droplets. I don't know how many you have there. You probably have 15 or 20.
Correct.
Individual dime-sized blood droplets and some type of transfer, I believe, down here at the 7 o'clock position. And yeah, it's right there. I don't know if that's part of a shoe, edge of a shoe or something. of his or hers, don't know. But and once again, you could probably look at that and see what's the sequence of which occurred first. We just don't have that right now. The details of this image isn't clear enough.
If this is a shoe print,
but now we do have, for this type of injury to occur, to create that much blood just from a blow, it takes time to accumulate that much blood.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's not something that you just get smacked and then you cough and that much blood comes up. So we had some type of that. She swallowed, or it was obstructing her breathing and choked her. And so there was a certain amount of time. I mean, it's not instantaneous. I don't know if she possibly may have bit her tongue. We just don't know.
Now, if this was a shoe print, one of the first things that I was going to ask is like, all right, well, if they stepped in this small amount of blood, like how many prints could that leave, right? This amount of blood on a shoe print, would you expect to see, this pattern go off, especially with something like maybe amino black? And could this be from there? I mean, that's about 8 inches or so away. That's not a very big step, but Miss Guthrie had some mobility issues.
Well, that's the thing is, what did he step in to get that transfer the first place?
Right. It's a significant amount of blood to step in for that.
Yes. Where is that blood pool?
Yeah.
What is that from?
Well, I was assuming it was there, and he just had like or she had some treads that somehow, I guess, were elevated so that either this side or that side missed contact with the shoe. But this here, do you think that's the second step from here?
It could be of just shuffling around. Don't know. Like I said, it's poor quality to work with, and it's a lot of speculation on it.
Right.
And some of that could be a swipe from a shoe. It doesn't always have to be, but that other pattern, I mean, it's very regular, and the other one, but it has defined edges. But I mean, blood does some funny things, and unless you have really clear images and a good scale so that you can look at it and analyze it, I've looked at these and I've done every type of as far as light saturation I could on it, trying to identify shoe edges and everything else, and it's just extremely difficult with the quality that they are.
Yeah, it definitely is. I can imagine. Is that a plant or is that amino black to you?
There's absolutely something different about that. And like I said, I don't know if it's something from the processing.
Yeah.
Or not. I mean, there's so much that we just don't know about it.
Yeah, no, there definitely is. There's quite a bit. Let's see. Here's the timeline. So at 1:47, the doorbell camera disconnects. At 2:28 is when the pacemaker disconnects from the phone. A lot of people are thinking he's inside the house for that. What is that, like 40 minutes or so? I'm not necessarily certain he's in the house for that long period of time. I think part of that time is him getting in the home. If you had it, what is the time frame of him being? Let's just say he got into the home right after he disconnected the camera. What is him being in that house for that 40 minutes or so, 35 minutes? What does that say to you?
Man, if he's in there that long, I mean, that's one thing that criminals have to have absolutely control of. They have to have control of time, for the fact that if they, for every moment they spend at a crime scene, if they don't have absolutely control during that time period and have maintained control of that they know the victim hasn't contacted 911, they know the victim hasn't hit some type of emergency call, that they don't, if they are dealing with the unknown, they're not going to spend time there.
Mhm.
So more than likely, when he made entry, he got in there and he saw that she was still asleep all the way up to the moment he made contact. Now, if he'd walked in there and she was fully awake, fully aware, and fully alert, we may have a different situation that he's not going to be able to stay there because he has, if he is going to abduct her, he's on a fast track. He has very little time. He doesn't know if law enforcement's on the way, what type of alerts or alarms has she initiated. And so we're on two different types. So the longer he spent there, the more likely is that he made contact with her when he knew and he realized that, oh, she hasn't contacted 911. That allows him to stay longer. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. The meaning that it was also everything was going to plan.
Yes, he was able to get into the room and see that she was still asleep. He at realized that there's no alarms going off. Nothing's been called. Nothing's been activated. He may have a scanner. He's listened to local law enforcement, see if they're being dispatched, and he knows that. Well, I woke her up from a sound sleep. I was able to restrict her movements, control all her devices, and so law enforcement not coming, which would give him a longer time frame and to be able to stay in the residence versus the unknowns that if he met her at the front door, he wouldn't know that.
Now he so a couple of things. So there's the software detects a person on camera, no video available. That's at 2:12. That would significantly shrink the time that he was in there. But law enforcement doesn't seem like they've made it seem like they don't have a motive of burglary. They don't believe that this was a robbery or burglary gone wrong. So I'm assuming there isn't like a huge search for anything. However, in the search warrant for Carlos that Truth and Transparency got, they were looking for medical devices and medication for Miss Guthrie. To me, that means that, well, obviously he must have taken there must be something missing from the house, like medical devices and medication. I've been saying this and I want to get your opinion on it. To me, that means he planned to take her. I don't think that something happens in the moment and then he abducts her. Let's just say it was something went wrong and she recognizes him or she scratches him and now his DNA is under her fingernails and now he feels the need that he has to take her with him. I don't see the thought process in that moment to say, oh, well, let me go grab her medications. That doesn't make sense.
I agree because we're not dealing with an individual that has empathy and sympathy for his victim. He's doing it. You don't take the medicines unless you have a reason to take them. He didn't stop and dress her wounds and from the injuries. He from that time point on, if your theory about that she did yell when she was outside, that changed the time frame for him, and a lot of things will happen pretty rapidly at that point. But if those medicines were taken and medical devices were taken, that was something that he went prepared to search for and take, and there's a reason for it. That's not something that is part of a typical type of assault that you would have with or interactions you would have with a victim, that you're just going to go and take their monies or take them to a bank and ATM, get their monies, or you're preparing for a future event. What is that future event?
Right. Heather's saying that her take from it was that they were looking to see if similar medications were found during the raid, not that they were taken from the house, per the family. Well, I mean, that's an interesting thing to be looking for. if they didn't have anything missing, to be looking for those type of medications. But and so, all right, that kind of threw me off where I was at. But all right, so the he takes her, leaves the house, Man, where was I going? I was going somewhere there, Steve, and I completely got lost track of where I was.
It was the medications. That was the topic at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And the preparation and the point that he took those measures, which is he was preparing for something.
Yeah, I agree. I think he definitely was preparing for something, possibly for something else. If there was no medication taken, if nothing but just Miss Guthrie was taken, I mean, that kind of opens up, I guess, more avenues. I mean, then he's really not caring about her well-being at that point, after the fact. If he did take her medications, he's wanting to keep her alive for something, and, ransom, perhaps, self-gratification. That's another option there or another possibility. I think that we can't, it's all good, Heather, that we can't escape from, or say that it's not out of the realm of possibility. But yeah, I think he was comfortable being there. I think he had the situation under control. Law enforcement also alluded to the fact that they believe that this was an abduction the entire way. They say that they've had information since day one that may have been the indication. What kind of evidence do you think they're finding that would have given them that indication that this wasn't a robbery or something else other than an abduction?
Well, I mean, is there some type of tape? Is there zip ties? Was there how was she bound? Is there there's so many things that could occur that would be indicative that he came with the means to control her. And I've arrested a lot of people in the middle of the night in my career. Go in either through no-knock warrants or even domestics or otherwise. And typically, even making an arrest, you're there anywhere from 10 minutes to 15 minutes. You're not there a long time. The longer you're there, the more likely family members are going to show up, and it just escalates the situation. So the time frame, if he's there from 10 to 20 minutes, I think that's reasonable, and no different than what an arrest would be, which is moving one person from a place where they're comfortable and don't want to go to a secondary location. Taking her to a secondary location is a worst case event, as we're finding out with this.
So that's a good place to transition to. He must have done something with her, and what kind of person. I mean, obviously this feels like somebody who's away from his family, if he has a family. I don't think he does, because she's bleeding actively. Maybe he left her on the porch to go inside to find a bandage or something. Maybe that's why she's sitting on the porch for so long. I doubt it, but but if that's not the case, then she's actively bleeding, and he's placing her, I'm assuming, in his car, because she had some mobility issues. So there's a possibility of blood being in the vehicle. They were testing the headrest for some of the, I think, for Carlos's vehicle and his van, etc. And so you have those things going down. How does he keep that from somebody, from a family, from a wife, from kids?
Well, and all those are indicators. Great point. For the fact that, just as we spoke earlier, you're having an individual that has the ability of not being tipped in by his wife, because you couldn't go out and do this crime, and without someone in your family saying, "Where were you at 2:30 last night?"
Right.
Or "Why weren't you at the work site?" And we also have an individual that someone's not driving his vehicle. If she's transported in a vehicle and there's some type of transfer of blood in that vehicle, and you have other family members or people that are roommates that may be in a vehicle, no one's reported that they found blood within a vehicle, and you just can't take and bring home a 84-year-old woman into a household that's occupied by people that's not involved. It just isn't possible, because uh, it might make great movies, but this isn't a movie. This is a real event. And we're talking about an individual that isn't missed in the middle of the night, 2:30, has the ability to go out and abduct someone, and has the location where he can take that person that's abducted and not cause an issue when he comes home, or he puts her in a basement or a room within his dwelling, or he has a property that has some type of area, storage bin or otherwise, that he can place her and keep her. So we're talking about an individual that doesn't have roommates that would turn him in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think he's a loner. I think he's by himself. Maybe perhaps he works away from home and he has the ability to work somewhere else. But if that's the case, if he's staying somewhere temporarily, then there's probably a really low likelihood that he has like a room locked somewhere where he's keeping her alive, within the house. It's most likely then, she may not have survived and he discarded her somewhere in the vast desert that's out there. To me, I strongly suspect that, his movements are a show. I think he's doing it, as a show, walking up the way he walks up to the, right here as he's walking up, he kind of looks down and is walking funny.
Well,
like I said, I think that's a show.
And everything, I can't argue with him. We've discussed this before. I agree with you. I think he went up there and he wants to place fear not only in her, but in the community also. And I think at some point you'll hear from him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
What did BTK, if he couldn't take it, he had to reach out. Zodiac, he had to reach out. The Unabomber had to reach out. These people, some of these people, certain types, they want to place fear not only in their victims but in others.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree. And as you can see, the way he's handling the plant here, that could be why they were stripped. But I strongly think that he was trying to. I think he was trying to hide. I think he wanted to keep the camera there and show him walking up and all that other stuff. I thought that was part of his plan. And somebody asked me, well, if that was part of his plan and he had a jammer and all this other stuff, then why take the camera? And I think, well, maybe perhaps he was manipulating the camera so much he feared that he may have left his DNA on it, or two, he was trying to cover up his getaway and maybe just didn't feel comfortable that with just the flowers or the plants in front of it, and thought maybe perhaps while they're walking out, the door could, knock it over. And if he had a vehicle there, if the jammer doesn't work perfect, then they may get a good image of what he's driving. And so, I think I think perhaps because it failed is the reason why he took the camera, and maybe he manipulated too much and he didn't feel comfortable leaving it behind. What are your thoughts on what he's doing with the camera and the flowers?
Well, the biggest mistake I think that he's made in this is when he's approaching the camera and he gives evidence that my DNA is here. I've got a flashlight in my mouth that I'm going to touch with these gloves at some point during this crime. And his DNA is there.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's doing with the camera, other than sending the message, I have no idea why he would even approach it. If he knew it was there, because he came prepared for it to be there. He has a mask on. He has gloves on. He came to commit a crime. He dressed for it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And he didn't avoid that camera. And there's a reason he didn't avoid it. Is it to send a message? I don't know. I mean, going up to a house that has cameras and you don't know if the cameras are activated, who is monitoring those cameras. Is it going to wake her? You don't know that. And unless you've done it before. And I mean, this all screams of a very disturbed individual.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, again, just kind of looking what he's doing, the flowers, they are covering the entire camera. I mean, right there.
Yeah, I looked at the base of it, and there's some debris, foliage debris that's trapped under the remaining parts of that camera assembly, which I can't believe they didn't take that assembly, because I think because he had to put that flashlight in his mouth at some point, and we know that he touched that framework to pull that camera off at some point. It drives me crazy as a CSI guy that there's anything left on that front porch from the framework that, you know, we have evidence. They may not have known it on day one that he had that light, but when they developed those, and that's the thing, is that's how come you take everything. We have an individual that either when he put that flashlight in his mouth, he was close to a source of DNA, his saliva, or if at any point he adjusted and turned on that light and getting it ready, he touched his mouth, that saliva. And then we know he touched that framework, he touched the door there. Did they process that area of the door? Did they process those doorknobs? Because did he try them? And if he went entry through there, those doors, what type of DNA transfer could we have had? And they may have collected it. I'm hoping they did. I hope that's where the DNA came from. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, I hope so too. You know, I would assume though, given the amount of time now, I think this is, I think we surpassed the amount of time it was to arrest Brian Koberger. And so if that's any kind of indication on where they're at, and I think that this case here may have had more resources, given the fact the attention that it garnished from all the way up to the president of the United States. Kash Patel, the FBI director, was heavily involved in this early on. I would assume that, you know, all the stops would have also been, you know, put out there for this case. And yet whoever committed this crime still remains free. So I don't know, man. The longer this goes, the more worried I become that the DNA and the IgG stuff just didn't pan out. But as you can see, to me, what he's doing here, these camera or the flowers end up right in front of where the lens is for the camera. If he's trying to utilize this to just kind of hang the flowers on it, so it's just hung there, they wouldn't be obstructing the camera in the front. If he was trying to manipulate it behind the camera, so that way he dislodged the camera from the frame, with the stems of the plants, that's not going to hide the camera this way. I think he's trying to manipulate the plants to hide the lens. And for whatever reason, he decided to just take the camera with him.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you know, as we've talked before, there's a reef just to the left of the door frame, right where he's at, just to the left there. On the wall, there's a reef there. If he just wanted to cover the camera up, he could take the reef and cover it up. You know, and
that's true.
He didn't choose to do that. Take that action.
That's true.
I mean, you can go back and watch some of the videos and see that reef there. And reefs just hang, either by wire or by some type of reef hanger, and just cover the camera up with it. He chose not to do that.
That is true. That is true. So, you know, one of the last things, and I hate to keep going back in circles here, but he doesn't have, if this is the same night, doesn't have the gun, doesn't appear on his person here, doesn't have the backpack on. What do you think he's doing, and where do you think those items are, and why aren't they no longer on his person?
Well, and like I said, we don't know the time frame, although if he got there in the first activation is 5 or 10 minutes. Did he go up there and just activate it first? Did he have everything within 10 or 20 yards? Did he have a staging area? It's not, you know, I've seen a lot of criminals that they first approach a residence and they won't have their burglary kit, or in this case, abduction kit with them. They'll go up there, and if they have to leave or there's something that occurs that they still have an excuse of, oh, I'm just doing such and such. We used to have a lot of burglaries, and it's not uncommon for burglaries to knock on a door of a residence, and if somebody answers the door, they say, have you seen my lost dog? Or have you seen my lost kid? And then they'll walk away. But then they'll return with their burglary kit. And in this case, is abduction kit. So is that something that is just part of his MO of how he commits crimes? That he first approaches, checks out the thing, then goes back and gets everything and then makes the entries? Just don't know.
Gotcha. Yeah, it would make sense. So if this was taken before, what if it was taken after he made the approach?
And it's possible he came back up to check that, okay, we've got her secured in the vehicle. If you go under the after, then he's looking, during the struggle, did I drop something? Am I looking?
Well, I would have thought that the doorbell camera wouldn't have been there. It was disconnected.
Yeah,
before.
and that's correct. And that would take away from that, unless I don't know when it was pulled off. Do you know when it was pulled off?
I'm assuming at 140 something when it disconnected from the I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it was pulled off, but the timeline says that at 147 the doorbell camera disconnects. And so and then at 2:28 is when her pacemaker shows it disconnecting from the phone. So I'm assuming that when that doorbell disconnects, obviously that's way before that she's left. So I don't think she's completely left.
Yeah, I didn't know at which point he took it. Did he come back to get the camera then or not? I don't know.
Yeah, to me, I think that if it's a situation where it's after, if the images of him with the backpack and the gun were before that, and he comes back around, and again, for those that didn't capture, if you're just tuning in, go watch back on my opinion on why I think it's after. But if it is, I think he left the gun in the backpack. I think he struggled to find entry. I think I think he may have struggled to get into the house, and I think he may have jumped a fence or whatnot. And if the gun in the front part of the of his person like that, if he had to jump a fence or something, is going to be very difficult to do. So he would have had to have taken that off. Maybe he took the backpack off and threw it over the fence or something of that nature. I don't know.
Well, I've broken into, in my trials of working crime scenes, of having to go back to crime scenes and break into houses, see how easy it is, because a lot of times there's not obvious signs of entry, and you'll go back and you'll check those doors and use different my driver's license used to be a wreck. You look out, how many times did I use them to go in, and or a knife tip, and to jimmy a door. There's a lot of different ways of getting in.
Yeah, there definitely is. There definitely is. I'm going to answer a couple of questions before we call it a show. Josh comes in saying, what do you two think about the reflective jacket and the holster in the open? What do you think about him wearing a reflective jacket? I know that there's like a whole night pollution situation, so maybe perhaps he wasn't really concerned about it, knowing that there wasn't a lot of lights that were allowed in the area, but that would kind of lead us to believe that he really cased out the area or was very familiar with the area or from the area. What are your thoughts?
To me, with the reflectors on the thing, that's probably the biggest thing that tells me that, or I would assume that he's by himself, because no one wants to work with a criminal that if it goes bad and law enforcement shows up, you're wearing reflectors. When they hit you with a spotlight, you're going to light up forever. And so that's one of the things for your about he wants to be seen. He's sending a message. He's flaunting his presence. I agree with that. but he prepares to hide his face, but he doesn't care about his outline or exposure that you can see him. He just doesn't want to be personally identified. It's not that he doesn't want to be seen. And I think those reflectors are part of that I feel confident in what I'm doing. I don't care that the people that's watching this camera sees me. And but whereas if he was working with other people, they wouldn't have that same opinion.
Yeah, I think that somebody would have been like, put some tape over that. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, that's what we had to do. I mean, we even had to tape up that once, and everybody uses firearms now that have night sights on them that glow in the dark. I mean, we even have to black those out for the fact that they're a signature. When you're in absolute darkness, you have to cover up everything. And but he didn't do that with those reflectors.
So outside of the fact that maybe perhaps he had the reflectors on and stuff, is there anything else that would make you believe that this was a one-person job?
No one stepped forward yet, accepting $1 million.
That's true. That's true. And nobody's talked about anything. You know, the more people that are involved, the likelier that somebody's going to speak to somebody and someone, you know, that information getting out. So nobody's come forward. That's absolutely true. You know, I don't think this was more than one person. I don't think this is some sort of like group effort, so to speak.
Yeah, if it was cartel or something that was coming up, and you know, we've discussed just about every possibility from that, you know, that we've sent ideas back and forth of what type of crime it was, what was the cause and the reason for them to, you know, is it revenge? Is it SA? For the fact it can be. Age has nothing to do with certain individuals when they go after a victim. It has nothing. It's all about power. And so it has nothing to do with age or looks or abilities. So that being the worst case scenario. But yeah, I don't know what his purpose was for this. Was it totally? I've always kind of thought that it was more of a abduction for profit that went wrong, and for the fact that he took. If you're correct about those medications being taken, you only take those for one reason.
But abduction for profit, you know, what would be the point of sending out the message of, well, I guess maybe you do want to send a message for fear. I guess you would. Well, you want to add anything else? Let everybody know anything. Is there anything else you want to add on before we call it a show?
Oh, no, I appreciate you having me. And I wish that, you know, our TV and society is always looking at that crimes are to be solved overnight. And that's just not the case. It may, this case, the sheriff being blunt, it may be days, weeks, months, or years. He's absolutely correct. And we just don't know what they will be. And like our watching TV, you know, they solve every case. The law enforcement is the smartest animal on the planet. You know, the FBI never fails. And that's not always the case. But, you know, they're doing their best. I'm sure every officer out there that's involved in this case is working diligently. Did they make mistakes? Absolutely. We're human. All CSI people out there, they make mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
100%.
Hopefully they minimize those things, those mistakes, but we'll only know that in the long term. One of the best cases that we've ever seen conducted investigations is Kohberger. I mean, you know, you look at that, they were spot on. Did they do a lot of those same measures? I would expect so in this case from the cameras.
I would too. You know, I got to get you back on about the William McCaslin, the general out of former general from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Got to get you on the show so we can kind of break down what your thoughts are on his disappearance. That one's interesting. That one's interesting. But thank you, Steve. Thank you for joining us. Everybody, please tune in again. I'll be on probably tomorrow night. I think I have Alina Smith on. We're gonna be talking about another disappearance, possible foul play. Foul play is some of the family members are thinking foul plays happened in a disappearance of an American in Spain. I'm getting some of the details now, and so we'll be probably talking about that tomorrow night. So make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Ring that notification bell. We'll see you guys then. See y'all next time. Peace out, everybody. Bye.